we see a child begin to thrive because they're no longer in survival mode. They're no longer constantly being triggered into fight, flight, or freeze by the very environments that are supposed to encourage them and help them grow. We end up playing whack-a-mole with behaviors instead of understanding what's going on underneath and seeing the pattern of how these things are popping up.
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie-cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. Today's episode is at the heart of why I started the Edison Collective. And it was something that I kept running into as a young OT, and then as I became even more seasoned, was that some of the basics of sensory processing, which are foundational to all the other skills your child will develop, that understanding, that explanation was missing. And that even among fellow OTs, like I was working with families who had been seeing occupational therapists for years sometimes and still didn't have the basic understanding of their child's sensory processing. Really feel like you are just kind of throwing darts in the dark or throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like you're not really certain what it is. But once you have the basics understanding of sensory processing, it becomes really easy to take something that's going on and tease apart what sensory systems are going on. It can be more complex than just the sensory system, and we will talk about that a little bit. Maybe isn't just auditory overwhelm. Maybe it's multi-layered and multifactorial. And then it gets a little bit more complicated. But when we go back to the very foundation of the nervous system and look at that sensory processing is coming in and the brain is processing it, it's labeling it, it's deciding what to do about it, then it's creating a plan of how should we respond? There's this idea. And then the body actually has to execute that idea. That's that praxis component or motor component. It's the actual action or the behavior. And so you have all these steps along the way. Sometimes it's not the sensory processing, that incoming piece. Sometimes it's later down the road. Sometimes it's the apraxia, not being able to carry out the movement that you want. And we're getting stuck in a motor feedback loop where you're doing the same thing over and over, which can sometimes be stemming. Sometimes it varies person to person. This conversation, I hope, will shed light for you if you are feeling like you've tried the calm down corner, you've taught your child deep breathing, have a sensory swing, fidgets all over the house and in your purse, a weighted blanket, but you're still dealing with the same meltdowns, the same resistance, and the same overwhelm. What is going on at the root? We've been taught to react to this behavior. Oh, but they can't sit still in class, so let's give them a fidget. Is a fidget in their hand going to keep their feet still? And why are their feet moving? Are they moving because they're bored? Are they moving because they're trying to keep themselves awake? Are they moving because they have to go to the bathroom? Are they moving because they're hungry? In order for them to process the information that they're supposed to be learning, part of their body needs to be moving for those things to work. There's a direct mind-body correlation happening. What is at the root of it? So if you ever have looked at your child's challenging behavior and what can I do differently, then I hope this episode will be helpful for you. Sensory needs are dynamic. They fluctuate throughout the day and they change over time, especially throughout childhood. So many parents have reached out to me and said, things were going good and then everything changed and now nothing works. Unfortunately, there is not a static, once we figure it out, we're one and done and we don't have to think about it again. your child is growing and changing and being exposed to different experiences and opportunities that shape who they are. And so, of course, their nervous system is going to change. Of course, as they grow, things are going to feel different. When we focus on just the behavior and the strategies after the dysregulation, we're missing a big part of it. What if we learned into what was going on before the dysregulation, starting with the sensory roots and moving up from there, knowing which systems your child really is sensitive to, which one are they missing cues from, which one activates them and helps them increase their attention and focus, which one really calms them down and grounds them when they're starting to feel flighty. Once you work through those questions and answers and look at those patterns, pick one at a time and focus on it, and you'll be surprised at what comes out. It becomes so much easier to identify triggers and build that supportive environment and shift from reactive to proactive. Here's something I can offer you right now if you're ready for some more advice. The Sensory Breakthrough. It's a limited time holiday special running for the month of November. It's a guided process where we map out your child's sensory needs, identify those triggers, what sensory systems are more sensitive, how are they responding. It gives you good ideas for a support plan and creating that environment, that ecosystem that your child can thrive in. This isn't about changing who your child is or requiring compliance in exchange for more support. It's about understanding how your child's nervous system is essentially defining their experience of their day-to-day life. And when we design supports that can make them feel safe and feel connected and have confidence and things are more accessible to them, then we start to see them blossom and bloom and thrive. So if you're ready to collapse the timeline on figuring this out, if you are like, yes, I want to learn this information, but also can you please just give me a shortcut to the answer? November, I got you. If you're ready to do this, there's a link in the show notes, and I can't wait to hear from you. Your child's sensory profile, what I also like to call the neurosignature, right? Because it's a signature unique to them of their base level neurology, how they're processing things, how they are labeling different experiences or deciding what to do about things is unique to each individual. And yes, of course, there are patterns. That's how we get our stereotypes. That makes it easier for our brain to figure things out quicker when we can rely on a stereotype. But when we start to look at the differences and the uniqueness of each neurosignature, we can tap into that understanding and we start to understand that behavior, why they're doing the things they do, whether it's just a quirky, funny thing or it's, hey, I really need help on this. This is really hard. I was recently in an IEP meeting. The goals were built for a child having a very difficult time in the classroom. And the language was such that when they're having a problem, they will be able to choose a calm down strategy or a regulation strategy. When prompted this many times, they will be able to use and implement a regulation strategy, or they will be able to vocalize and ask for help. I struggle with these kinds of IEPs because there's a lot of responsibility laid at the foot of the child. And they are also making the assumption that when that child is dysregulated or moving into a dysregulated state, that they are able to access the language and the executive function skills to make such a request or to implement a strategy. A lot of times we lose kids because they are already well on their way to dysregulation. They're already at the exit ramp. We cannot get them back onto the highway. So we need to be thinking before that. What are the triggers in their environment? What are the things that are stacking up against them in that environment? And that helps so much to shift from going reactive and damage control when we are experiencing dysregulation to, hey, this is a really noisy environment, and I get that you're very sensitive to that. Let's take more frequent breaks. Let's use ear defenders or noise canceling headphones. Let's find you a quiet space where you can think about this subject or activity or homework assignment that we're doing. When we start to mitigate stuff before it happens, we see a child begin to thrive because they're no longer in survival mode. They're no longer constantly being triggered into fight, flight, or freeze by the very environments that are supposed to encourage them and help them grow. We end up playing whack-a-mole with behaviors instead of understanding what's going on underneath and seeing the pattern of how these things are popping up. So I want to go back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. Sensory needs fluctuate throughout the day. In an episode that aired earlier this fall with Sam Marion, we talked about how your sensory levels are like a soundboard. When you see the images or footage of somebody using a mixing board in a sound recording studio, like somebody is singing and they're behind the window adjusting levels on this big board that has all these different like volume controls and for treble and for bass and for a lot of other things that I don't really know. Think about that as your child's sensory system. As you go throughout the day, different environments change what you need in order to stay flexible, able, and regulated in that environment. We're not looking for calm, cool as a cucumber all the time. When you're in a high intensity environment, it's important that your nervous system responds accordingly. Your regulated nervous system is responsive, adapting to the situation. When we become fixed and can't adapt, that's when we start to see those survival methods. This is not the way it's supposed to be. I cannot handle this. And then we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. As your child is growing, their nervous system is changing. As they are getting exposed to different things, as they are having different lived experience, as they have more stressors in their life or more time to regulate, we see fluctuations. And that changes over time as your child develops. What works at 7 a.m. might not work at 4 p.m. when they're just getting home from school and had a whole day of experiences contributing to where their sensory system is. This is why just handing over a fidget when a child doesn't sit still doesn't really work until we look at what is going on underneath it. What is the reason that their body has moved? Maybe it's because they missed recess today for whatever reason and they haven't been able to move their body and they are just wound up with energy that needs to be expressed and let out. A fidget isn't going to help. In fact, a fidget's notes can make it worse. And when we recognize that mind-body connection of how the sensory system needs movement and how movement can be very supportive in helping for this nervous system, the sensory system, to process through those experiences can be really helpful. When we start being able to look at those patterns, it becomes easier to find what those triggers are. But also at the same time, when we are finding what are those regulators, what are the things that help bring it down, then it becomes so much easier to set up patterns and supports in place. I'm going to use a little metaphor for a minute. There used to be a lot of popularity around creating a sensory diet, right? A regular diet. Okay, we're going to have this in the morning for breakfast. These are the kind of meals that you can choose from. Then in the afternoon, we're going to do this. And this is what our lunch is. And in the evening, we're going to do this. And then there are some diets that are more like little tiny meals all throughout the day. I want you to think about your child's nervous system and sensory strategies or interventions or different basic activities that you do, whether it's going outside for a walk, sitting down to read a story or listen to a podcast. There are some great kids podcasts. We've been really getting into it, and I cannot tell you how much it has improved her auditory processing, her ability to listen and follow along with a story and comprehend what's going on. I've been really impressed with how that has helped my daughter. Anyway, I digress. When you figure out what those settings are, what are the activities that help your child, that you see them functioning well in and afterwards, think of those as little sensory strategies that you start to build in more during the day. So if you have a child who loves parkour or should be a parkour person, I don't even know what that means. If you have a child who is like doing parkour all the time, jumping off, flipping, climbing up things that they shouldn't be climbing on, crashing onto the couch, Think about opportunities for that child to graze those experiences throughout the day and see how that shifts their regulation. Are they more adaptable? Are they better regulated? Are they better able to respond in ways that are a little bit more appropriate to the situation? When we start playing around with those kinds of strategy, pick one and stick with it. Try it a couple different times a day, a couple different days over the week, and just look at one. See what comes up. Pick one thing and walk it through for a couple days. What are the sensory systems at play here? We always have a difficult time in the morning getting dressed and getting ready. Okay, let's break down this task. What is going on getting dressed in the morning? We are transitioning out of pajamas into regular school clothes. Is it the clothes that's actually an issue, or is it that transition of our morning time is done, we are leaving home, we're going to school? Is it the clothes? I don't like wearing these clothes. The tag bothers me, or the texture doesn't feel just right, or I want to wear the same exact thing every day. Okay, there's more of the tactile system involved in that. Is it that they wake up dysregulated and are hungry and irritable until they've had breakfast and had a little bit of time to get that blood sugar stabilized first thing in the morning? Is that what's going on? So maybe we need to get up and do breakfast first and then come back and get dressed. Does that change things for them? Is it needing more input or less input? Maybe your morning is a cacophony of noises and people and moving parts and getting ready, and this person is going out the door this way, and this person has to go here, and the dog is barking, and the baby is crying. Maybe it's the noise of the early morning routine that is so dysregulating. Start to look at when they're reacting, back up before that. What was happening before that was leading to this? What are the systems that were being affected? This is where it's hard because you have your own sensory processing lens that you are filtering the environment through. So if you are not auditorily sensitive, but your child is, you might think the amount of noise is perfectly normal. But if your child is hypersensitive to it, you're missing some of those cues that they are getting. And so they are more easily overstimulated, even though it's not registering the same way with your nervous system. Or vice versa. Maybe your child needs a lot of movement and you just want to sit still, please. So where this idea comes from, that the nervous system is the basis. There were two occupational therapy researchers, Taylor and Trott, developed the pyramid of learning in the 1980s. They said that the sensory system is the foundation of all other skills. We have our 8 sensory systems at the base. We have touch, the tactile system, olfactory, which is smell, which is seeing, auditory, which is hearing, gustatory, which is taste, vestibular, which is located in the inner ear, and it's 3 semicircular canals which pick up where you are in response to gravity. So it can tell where you are in relation to the ground beneath your feet. People who have a hypersensitive vestibular system get motion sickness easily. And people who have a really low threshold or low sensitivity in vestibular love to ride roller coasters and go cliff jumping and tend to be a little bit more daredevilish in those kinds of things. Then we have the proprioceptive system. This system is most often the most grounding and organizing system. When we talk about using heavy work strategies, this is tapping into that proprioceptive system, which is using the muscles and joints, or receptors are in the muscles and joints. Anytime we're moving our bodies, sometimes it needs to be big movements. Sometimes we need to be jumping, we need to be climbing, where we are exerting multiple large group muscles at the same time. And then the 8th one is interoception. How do I feel? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I cold? Am I hot? Am I happy? Am I content? Am I worried? Am I frustrated? All of those emotions. The interoceptive system allows us to tap into those feelings. So that is the base. We have our central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Those have to be functioning for there to be incoming sensory information, right? So then we have our sensory system, those 8 different systems. Then it goes into sensory motor development. Sensory's coming in, motor is going out. So that gives us our postural security. If we think about a baby in their milestones, one of those first things is being able to roll over and starting to sit up. Can they hold themselves up? Do they feel safe sitting up? Can they move when they're sitting to reach for things and move around easily, transition from crawling to sitting easily? Awareness of two sides of the body, being able to start to motor plan of, oh, I see that toy over there. I want to move to it. Can I figure out how to move my body to get to that? Body schema, reflex maturation, ability to start to screen input, looking at someone and seeing somebody else come into the room, being able to pick that up, being held by somebody and then hearing mom's voice and orienting to that, or being with somebody and blocking out other things going on around as well. Then we move up the pyramid to perceptual motor development. So this is where we start to learn eye-hand coordination skill, ocular motor skills, so that visual, so hand-eye coordination. Then we get to postural adjustment. So this is walking and moving around more fluidly in the world. We get to auditory language skills and visual spatial perception, being able to tell, is this floor safe? Right around the time where visual spatial perception is coming on board in the brain, they did a study where they put toddlers who are just starting to learn to crawl on a plexiglass box. Over part of it, they had a carpet, and that's where they started the baby out. And as the baby went to the edge of the carpet, you could see when they could start to tell, oh, there's no carpet here anymore, and I can't see the bottom. And having those visual perceptual skills to tell that there was that plexiglass there and that was going to hold them, even though it looked like there was nothing there at all. And sometimes you start to see this with like different carpet patterns and different things on the floor. And it's interesting to see how that develops. But that eventually leads to in kindergarten, when kids are really struggling to learn their letters and their shapes. Is that something that's going on underneath that? Are they not able to see the consistency in those shapes? Then we move up to the very top of the pyramid, which has daily living skills. So this is self-feeding, this is getting dressed, this is being able to participate and handle your own grooming, this is behavior, and at the very tippy top, academic learning. And so when we focus only on academic learning when a child is struggling in school, and we don't go back and look at these other areas of what is going on underneath, we're trying to build skills on an unsteady and unstable foundation. And so if we don't go back and look at what is happening, are primitive reflexes integrated? Do they have established hand dominance? How is their visual perception? Can they recognize an A as an A? Or it looks different to them each time? How is their language and cognition starting to develop? Are they curious about the world? These are all things that play into academics and regulation. That child at the IEP I was telling you about, if we don't go back and understand what is happening, what are the skills this child has, what are the strengths they have, and then what are the demands of the environment, before we start to put expectations on them for them to learn strategies to do these things, we first have to have a good understanding of what is going on below the surface and how is the environment impacting their ability to learn. If our foundation is shaky, if we don't know what's going on, everything we do is going to be guessing or unstable because we don't know if it's actually helping. This isn't to say that we need to focus on deficits or weaknesses, but identifying those so we can put supports in place to better support that child so we can focus on the strengths and develop the things that they're good at, that they enjoy, that they love. If there are some visual perceptual differences, yes, we're going to look at remediation, helping that child develop those skills. But we're also going to, at the same time, being accommodating of those needs so that we are not holding this bar up high and saying, you need to meet me here. We need to practice. We need to do this, without also saying, here are things we can do when this is really hard. And when we are checking another skill, we're not creating a barrier because of this. So when you start asking what's going on underneath, what's driving this, it allows us to shift from being reactive to proactive and start to create an environment that is more supportive, sustainable, accommodating, and understanding. When we do this within the context of our home and for our family, even though it might seem like sensory needs are competing, looking at the ways that we can meet those needs more regularly throughout, it doesn't become a zero-sum game of for you to have your sensory needs met, then mine can't be met. When we start to build in more of those things for our kids and for ourselves, it becomes a lot easier to shift that environment and create one that works for you and allows your family to thrive in their unique and own individual neurosignature, not because we are asking for masking or compliance in order to participate as a unit. But when we understand that root cause, we can stop living in crisis and survival mode so that we have more connection and less time correcting. We have more time creating that environment that's supportive and preventing those meltdowns from happening because we're more adaptable throughout the day, that we need less intervention. We spend less time mitigating meltdowns. So the question becomes, how do you actually figure out your child's specific sensory profile? Because knowing those sensory needs and then moving up from there is one thing, and knowing which sensory system your child struggles with is another. So what I would like for you to do is you start, whether it's in your notes app on your phone or somewhere where you can keep some notes, you're going to start a sensory observation journal for 3 to 5 days. Observe and jot down when meltdowns are happening. What are the challenging behaviors that are going on? If it's not a meltdown, what is the thing that you would like to change? Pick one thing that happens throughout your week. What was happening before that? Was there a transition that happened? Was it a loud environment? Was it certain textures being exposed to? Maybe they're really hungry and fatigued. They just got home from school. Maybe they're not eating their lunch. It's happening that's contributing to this. And what could be, when you start to peel that apart and figure out what are the systems contributing, then we can start to figure out what can we do to support those systems, or what are the systems that are going to help carry them through that. Because where there is a weakness, there is also strength. And sometimes those can be on both the opposite sides of the coin from each other. And figuring out what that looks like for your child will be really helpful. It's not about judging or fixing it. It's just about gathering that data, becoming a detective in your child's sensory world. If you're thinking this is helpful, but I need more guidance, please check out the show notes for the link to the sensory breakthrough that is happening specifically for the month of November. It's a comprehensive sensory assessment where we get clear on your child's specific sensory sensitivities, which systems are dysregulating them, which systems help them regulate. Maybe they're in sensory burnout where everything is just off the charts. What are some of the triggers or ways that we can move forward from there? And when you have this information, I find that you don't even need me to suggest strategies. Most parents can go, oh, okay, that's what's going on. So I think if I change this, and sometimes it's just these simple little shifts of knowing what's going on underneath that allows the whole narrative to change. Okay, how it works is there's 2 different questionnaires. It can take about 45 minutes to an hour total. The first one is a multiple choice questionnaire. Usually takes 15 to 20 minutes. Don't overthink it. Some people finish it in 10 minutes. The next one is a narrative form. So you're filling out more of what's going on for you in the day-to-day. If you have any recent evaluations or anything from providers, you can add that to supplement. Then I review everything, and I use a neuro-affirming lens to go through and look at what are the things that are tying in. I use my background as an occupational therapist and a neurodivergent mom. Once I have both of those forms that you filled out and I've reviewed it, then I create a video for you and I explain the different systems and how your child is responding. But I tie it back into that form where you told me about what your biggest challenges were and what your child's strengths, to tease apart what's really underneath it all. And there's a PDF that you can help work you through it if you prefer reading things, and you can take some notes. You can also use this information to share with teachers, caregivers. It's yours. And if there are any questions or anything that doesn't quite fit right, you have a week to ask me any clarifying questions. I'm just doing this for November. Once the end of November hits, or once I reach capacity, I'm going to close things down and spend the time with my family for the holidays. So just know that the families that I have done this with are seeing how having that information and knowing how to start to tease apart things, connecting those dots, is continuing to change things for them. And one of the families that I've worked with for several years now took this information to heart, and they were able to create an environment that was more supportive of everyone's nervous system, particularly one child. That child is no longer stuck in survival mode. They are no longer in fight, flight, or freeze. They are no longer chronically, acutely stressed, both chronic and acute stress. And the growth that we are seeing right now is so incredible and just exponential. It has been so fun to witness that. And the coolest thing about it is they did it. I just helped translate the information and connect those dots. But it was a mom who, once she had that information, all of a sudden saw her child so differently, and yet who her child always has been. And in the first week, went from multiple meltdowns a day to just a handful a month. And still to this day, she's now able to prioritize and do some of the things that she has wanted to, but has been putting her life on hold to help this child. Now they both have space. They both know how to meet their needs. They both know how to ask for what they want. Not only is the child thriving, but so is mom. And yes, it's still hard. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. They still have struggles. It's not like it wipes everything out, but it's so good. I'm so honored to be a part of their journey and to have helped. One parent told me in the last 10 years of therapies and IEPs, no one has ever explained our child this way. We were able to make some big changes, and we made some little changes, and we saw huge differences. But more than that, we have more time together, fewer meltdowns, and better communication. I encourage you, stop playing whack-a-mole. Get to the root of what's going on. Look for those patterns. Sensory needs aren't a problem to fix. Sometimes we can't fix those processing differences, but it's information that we can understand. It helps us to connect the dots, and it shows us where to provide support. And once you understand that, everything else gets easier. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week and hope to see some of you inside the sensory breakthrough. Until then, start that observation journal and trust your instincts. You know your child better than anyone.
That's it for this week's episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.